everyone, it's Monica Poling. Welcome back to my podcast, Let's Make Some Noise, where I serve up unsolicited advice on marketing, branding, strategy, and the art of making noise. Today, we're going to talk about strategy. What is strategy? What is the definition of strategy? And do you need a strategy? So the term strategy is said to date back to Greek text and originate from the word strategos. But the idea, the concept of strategy actually predates that and predates Christ, it is the BC era, and is generally attributed to Chinese warriors, and in particular Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. And Sun Tzu was a very famous general and also a known and respected strategist. Okay, the warriors are throwing lightning down on my face. Fast forward several thousand years, and the leading expert on strategy is considered to be Dr. Michael Porter. And Professor Porter, he's a professor at Harvard University, and he has done a lot of writing and a lot of speaking about the idea of strategy. He defines strategy as strategy is the big picture of how the organization is going to win in its environment, whatever that is. Dr. Porter also has another quote that I really like, and it's related to strategy, and that is, if all you're trying to do is essentially the same thing as your rivals, it is unlikely that you'll be very successful. So again, strategy has the sentiment of winning, of competing. It continues to have that sort of battle sentiment. To put strategy into a more personal use, I like to give the example that, as a child, I really wanted to be an opera singer. So if I decide today, you know what, I'm going to finally fulfill my dream, I am going to be an opera singer. Here are the steps I need to take to make that happen. I need to obviously take voice classes. I need to start networking with people in the arts world so that I can start to get my resume out there. And there's a whole line of things I need to do. So the plan is music school. The plan is getting my resume, my photo together, getting my contacts together. So that's the plan. The strategy then is not just that I'm going to be an opera singer, but obviously if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be the best opera singer. I'm going to outperform everybody that's out there. So I need to also figure out how to win at opera singing. And then when I start calculating, okay, well, it's going to probably take me 2 or 3 years of fairly intensive music classes just to get to the bare entry level. And so that's where strategy is taking music classes is a plan. And it's good. It's good to have a plan. But the strategy is I have to give up 3 years of this work life that I love and enjoy doing, working with clients. Is that worth it? Is that battle, is me conquering music school worth it? And so where the strategy comes in is now I need to ask myself, is this next step, how is it going to help me win at my life, whatever that is, whatever I want my life to be? Is opera singing the next thing? And then is it worth the time and effort I'm going to have to put into it to make that happen? I'm going to say probably not. It's going to be somewhat of an uphill battle at my age to gain the vocal chops to become an opera singer, but could be wrong. But for me, now that it's one thing to make a plan to be an opera singer, it's another thing to create the strategy and evaluate the resources that I need to make that happen. And once you start evaluating the resources and talk about not just doing it, but being better, being the best at it, that's where the strategy comes in. Is there value in you doing it, both for yourself, for your internal stakeholders, as well as for your customers and clients? So there may be value for me becoming an opera singer because I've always wanted to do it. The people who are going to listen to me sing, there may be less value. So that is where the strategy, not just considering I want to go from hill 1 to hill 2, but are the people at hill 2 ready for me and ready for my voice? A third example, it's probably more relevant to the nonprofit world, is when you do your annual conference, your annual event, whatever that looks like, your fundraising move, you've probably at some point or another either considered or held a silent auction, right? And so you have a person who is maybe working full time 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then the silent auction generates maybe $30,000, $40,000, right? So you could have as a plan to increase the silent auction participation, but the strategy for that is why has that not gained traction to the point where it's already at this point? What is missing to take it to the next level? And do you have the resources to make that happen? Maybe you need more newsletter outreach. Maybe you need more graphic design to promote the items. maybe that full-time person needs to put in another 160 hours. So if your silent auction is only making 10, 15, 20,000, is it worth it to put another full-time person for another 4 weeks into that mix? And then if it's worth it, then why? Like maybe you're setting up for, okay, the next 3 years, we're going to become the known entity. Everybody's going to want to donate to our silent auctions so that in 4 or 5 years, we've built this really respected and very well-known silent auction. So again, that's for you as an individual, as a nonprofit entity to answer. Is it worth it to grow this silent auction when we're expending far more resources than really the money that we're bringing in? And, and then there's questions like, are you creating goodwill among the artists and among the vendors who are donating items? Are people buying the silent auction items? Or do you have a lot of them left over at the end? Is there a whole lot of kind of small things that people aren't buying? And so how much of what you're selling doesn't sell or is only selling because people who want to support your organization? So it's a battle that most nonprofits fall into. Like, is it worth it for me to grow my silent auction? And why and how? What are the resources that I need? And what's the value for my organization? And what's the value for the constituents as well? Like, are they begging you for more items? And in that case, maybe it is worth it. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's each individual organization needs to determine for themselves the value of that particular challenge, that particular battle, and how they're going to approach it and how the response is going to be. So there's a quote out there from David Norton and Robert Kaplan, who wrote the Balanced Scorecard, and they found that only 10% of strategic plans are executed. So that's a lot of time and energy and expense put into building a strategic plan that then sits on someone's desk or sits on your website and does not actually serve as a guiding document. And so, again, you want to talk, is the strategic plan a battle that you want to enter into? Is that something that is worth it for your organization? The two writers also say that 85% of leaders spend only an hour a month on strategy, and 50% of leaders don't spend any time on strategy. The plan's written, goes on your website, boom, it's done. That is the plan. The strategy is to write the plan and let it sit there. So, if that makes you look good to your board members or your partners, then maybe that is the point of the strategic plan. But that doesn't mean that it has to fail. It just means your approach to it needs to be, you need to spend some time. You need to spend more than 1 hour a month on strategy. Where are we going to go? What battles are we going to fight? How are we going to win? Numbers suggesting that 90% of strategic plans never get executed, never get completed, leads to the question, why do we do strategic plans? Is it worth it? Is there value in our organization to do that? Why do people do strategic plans? One reason is we're comfortable with familiar, right? We like the idea. It's, people, that's what nonprofits do. We get together, we talk about our future, we make plans for our future. We're going to talk about where we're going to be in 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. It also gives us a sense of control. We feel that when we make a plan, a strategic plan, we're taking control of the future of the organization. We're not leaving things up to chance. Another reason that we do strategic plans is that this is the way we've always done things. We love the comfort of the familiar. I'd hazard a guess, too, that many nonprofits get some sort of funding from the government, and the government is notoriously, a decade or two behind in collecting data and information. So there are probably some nonprofits that just are required to do strategic planning just because that's part of the grant funding process. It's part of the reporting process. Do a strategic plan and tell us your results and how you're going to spend this money. So, but, the landscape in the nonprofit world is changing, and doing things the way we've always done them is not always a solution. And you'll find from a lot of nonprofits, it's frequently becoming the wrong solution. That we need to kind of, as nonprofit executives, we need to figure out new ways, new solutions, take a look at challenges in a new way, because we do see, in Florida, funding being cut for the arts. We're seeing all kinds of conversations about people asking if nonprofits should be taxed. So things are changing. Conversations are sort of turning against the nonprofit. And so that is why you should do a strategic plan, because you also need to be ready for what's next. You need to be ready for the future and whatever that future holds. And, if you're going to get less funding from the government, you need to be what's the plan for that? How are we going to be less reliant on one funding source. Any entrepreneur class that you take will tell you need multiple revenue streams. So if one dries up, you've still got other monies coming in. And so that's really like the benefit of strategic planning. It does give you a vision, gives you a direction. It allows you to think beyond your immediate perimeter. What are we going to talk about? And what are we going to address in the future? So we're going to assume that you're watching this video because you either A, need to do a strategic plan by necessity, or that you just would like to check in and kind of see where you're at, take stock, and then kind of figure out what the next steps are. So what are the key points that you need to do? What are the key steps in creating a strategic plan? Number one, obviously, is take stock of where you are now. What is your revenue? How is your revenue coming to you from your 990 form? Is it through individual contributions, government grants, events? Is it through voluntary contributions? So you want to take stock of where the revenues are coming from, and you want to take stock of just where you're at in position to your competitors or in position to other nonprofits. How's your website performance? What are the metrics? How are your social media metrics? How is the sentiment of your staff, of your board, of your constituents? Do you have enough members? Do you have enough volunteers? So the first step is just taking stock. Where are we at in terms of what is our position today? And then obviously the second step is where would we like our position to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and start thinking about, well, okay, yeah, government funding is a little bit risky. Foundation funding is a little bit risky. So I'd like to create some form of partnership agreements, revenue agreements, where I can not rely quite so much on the grant writing process. The grant writing process itself is a little pricey, right? You've got to hire the grant experts, and you never know if your grant for your organization is going to be heard or liked for various reasons. So kind of finding some areas where maybe some more money can come in on a more routine and regular basis. So then your next step, after taking stock and figuring out, what are the next steps, is what battles am I ready to fight? I mean, obviously you can't fight them all. So what's my most important priority? For most of you, that's probably going to be revenue in some form or another. It might be board management. It might be, again, membership management. It might be member communication. I mean, there could be any number of things, but generally most of that is tied into revenue in some way. So what is the most critical thing I want to address? Or what are the most critical issues we want to address in the strategic plan when we figure out where we're going to be 3 or 4 or 5 years from now? And I'm going to continue to talk about members as the example. I know there are many other issues facing nonprofits, but members is sort of there's a lot of changes happening in individual contributions. And this is, the thing that's kind of shocking is this is not surprising that people are giving less. I mean, we've been talking and we've been hearing the media talk about this for 20 years. I mean, in 2004, Vox Media wrote an article about the death of charitable giving. So, when people are shocked now that people are giving less, I was like, oh, it's post-pandemic, or it's the great Me Too generation or the great resignation generation. It's not. This has been a trend that has been happening for 20 plus years. Axios last year in 2023 also wrote an article how charitable giving is at its lowest volume in 3 decades. So we know this to be true. So ignoring it or hoping it's a blip or a temporary, market, what do they call that, market correction, that's probably not a great strategy. It's probably, if you rely on a certain amount of percentage for member donations and contributions, it may be something you need to address, but it depends on what balance. That's where we want to take stock of where you are currently. If you have 50 members, they're paying $100 a month. $100 a year. You're looking at about $5,000, right? So do you want to put a ton of resources, a full-time staff person, into fixing a membership program where even if you are like, we're going to double membership, okay, great. So you make an additional $5,000. So that may not be a priority for everyone. It may not be a logical battle to fight because your casualty count, your drain on resources, on staff time, on funding, on energy, on all of that is going to be so much not worth the $5,000 extra you're going to raise. So that again is with the strategic planning. It's not just throwing out an arbitrary, we're going to double membership. Like, okay, how? Like what are the tactics when we know that everybody is donating less? What are the tactics we're going to deploy to ensure that we are not one of the casualties of lower charitable giving rates. So yeah, the next question is, how am I going to win this battle? And you've heard of SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relatable, and they're time sensitive. And it's achievable is the question. Like, maybe you can double your membership, but you got to ask yourself, first of all, why hasn't it doubled already? What's been the roadblock to that? And if the roadblock is not your own internal mechanism, if it is just people are giving less, that is a challenge that can be overcome. Is that a challenge you want to dive into? And then if so, then what can you do to get more people involved and interested in joining your membership? And, it's people used, it used to be enough to show a picture of a sick child or abused puppy, or, kind of showing the impact of the money. And that used to be enough. But now people have so many other things that are competing for their attention that it is, the feel goodness of donating to a charity or donating to a membership, buying a membership is really not enough. And now we need to start doing this. Why you see so many larger nonprofits giving a gift with purchase, like, oh, get this little bag, because hopefully you'll think your $50 membership is worth this cute little bag that you get in addition to. But really, what we're starting to see is the more scrappy nonprofits, the bigger ones that have bigger budgets, they're starting to offer things like, they're offering education programs, they're offering meet the curators, they're beginning to get more creative. And so that is a decision for each organization. Like, all right, membership is down. It's down across the country. It's been down for 3 decades, but we still want to focus on membership. So, because, often what happens is, well, people believe in my mission. Like, okay, maybe, but, you are really beating a nationwide 30-year average. So maybe they do believe in your mission, but maybe you need to also pay attention to that number. And that's not saying getting new members is insurmountable, but it is saying you need to come up with new ideas and new strategies, new ways of winning that battle in your strategic plan. Your strategic plan cannot be, I'm going to get 50 new members, because there's no heft to that. That will never happen if you don't outline what is behind that push to bring in this new blood, this new energy into your membership. All right. So when you look at the steps of strategic planning, where am I now? What's my position? And sometimes your own position can easily be modified or tweaked a little bit without needing to fight the big battles, right? You could just clean up your website, make a better click now, donate now. But sometimes you don't need a whole 3-year strategy to do things a little bit better in the moment. But so where am I now? Where do I want to go? What battle do I need to fight? And how can I win this battle? What tools do I need to win this battle? And is the expenditure of those resources, those tools, worth fighting? And that is really what a strategic plan is. You're not going to just lay out 50% increase in revenue, 50% increase in membership. You're going to lay out, this is how I'm going to do it, because this is, I believe, why it's not currently there already. Okay, if you're still here, thanks for sticking with me. And please feel free to like my video below and subscribe to my channel for more videos on nonprofit strategy and nonprofit branding. And head over to my website, monicapoling.com, to subscribe to my newsletter to get more tools and resources. All right, so we talked about those depressing numbers that only 10% of strategic plans get implemented, only 10% are successful, whatever the term is. So why? Why do they fail? What are the roadblocks? You've spent all this money and time and energy and brought people together. What are the roadblocks to having that strategic plan be successful? That you know it's good for the organization, so why isn't it happening? All right. Number 1, the value for your stakeholders. I used to belong to a nonprofit organization where it was mandatory that the board and the staff make a contribution every year on Giving Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And so I used to grump a little bit, like, I don't think this is legal. They're like, shut up, you have to give. And like, so, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a joiner. I'm like, okay, whatever. But what would happen is that it was so unfair, because I would do it to be a team player for whatever my own personal reasons are. But then all the other team, there's no way to enforce that, right? There's no value for the staff to do that. There's no way to enforce it. So really you're creating this misaligned culture where the people who are trying to do good actually feel cheated and feel underappreciated because there has been no reward. So, and almost very few members of the board of directors would donate, which always seemed like, why does the staff have to do it if the board doesn't have to do it? Like, why does anyone have to do it? So instead of saying you must do it and setting up this environment of fear, or else, there's the employed or else, if you really want to, kind of beat up your staff and your board for donations, the other way to do that is give something in return. Offer a day off, or offer a theme park day for everyone who contributes, or a dinner out, or a happy hour. And, if you offer a day out, yes, there's some financial cost to the organization, but overall not that much, because, in the end, the work's going to get done whether or not that person takes an extra day off or not. So then it becomes voluntary. Then there's a value for your staff members to say, okay, I'm going to make my $50, $100 contribution because, I'm going to take advantage of that afternoon off, or the 2 hours off, or the, whatever it is. So when you make a policy that says now you have to do this, but it's because I said so, instead of, and here's the value of why you should do this, it makes it a lot easier to execute your plan, because you're giving people a reason, giving them a value for participating in the plan, in the strategy behind the plan. The number 2 reason is great planners are very frequently not great executors, and vice versa. So a planner will come out and have their big, great ideas and put things on paper and a vision of the organization in the future, right? And then the people who are executing the plan are like, you know what? That is just one more thing on my to-do list. Once again, I don't see the value of me doing it, but congratulations, you launched this plan, but unless someone's going to kind of guide me in the execution, I'm not going to make a misstep. I'm not going to move forward on this plan because it's your plan. It's not mine. I don't know what steps to execute. So that's why as the planner, as the leader, you need to stay involved in the process. You can't just build a plan and pass it off to your team and say, okay, see you in 2 years. Tell me where you're at. I saw this one thread on Reddit where this one organization has been building their strategic plan for 4 years because people can't agree, and they can't, even the planning process has ground to a halt because people can't agree on what the execution looks like. And I think that's, that's just like not only no, but no. And, when the executors, right, they're the ones who are doing the work. Again, they're kind of the people pleasers. They're doing the work. They're out there trying to help make the organization live up to its vision, its values. And then their reward, their thank you for that is, great, now you're going to be an integral part of the team to take us to the next level. And here's 40 more hours of work that you have to do. And without sort of taking the needs of the executors into place a little bit. And I've been with so many nonprofits who's like, it's your job. I'm like, well, okay, I guess it is my job. But at some point, you have to take something off my plate. You can't just keep putting more things on my plate that I can't finish. And so I think that's a reason that the people who are executing the plan sometimes are resistant to it. So they need to be part of the vision. They need to understand what is expected of them. And the expectations don't necessarily need to be results. It doesn't need to be, you need to get me 10 new members by March. But it does need to be, okay, we're going to up our communication strategy, give me a plan for how that's going to happen, and then involve the executors in the building of the strategy, the strategic tactics, the components of the plan, so that they understand what is facing them and what they need to do to make that happen. Another reason strategic plans don't, as I mentioned, they're too complex. You'll see in particular tourism entities like the state of Washington, the Seattle Tourism Board. They have these hugely complex plans, and it's great. They have a huge staff. They probably have the capabilities, but when you are have 10 or 12 pillars, and every pillar has an additional 10 tactics, there is only so much ability to interconnect all the tactics across all the departments to meet the larger vision. And so, if you're looking at 100 tactics, even if they're deployed across various departments, each tactic is going to affect your departments. If you're going to position yourself differently, if you're going to change your marketing messaging, if you're going to change your newsletter cadence, that is not just a marketing challenge. It's a sales challenge. It's like in tourism, it's a convention services challenge. It's a convention sales challenge. It's an international team challenge. And it doesn't just affect one or two people. And so the more complex, the more people have to navigate. Does this mean this? Does that mean this? So sometimes just having a simple plan, we're going to do this one thing, and we're going to do it very, very well. We're going to allocate all our resources, and then we're going to let this thing bloom and blossom and become the strategy. Sometimes that is, it's better to be successful at one great thing rather than sort of unsuccessful at 100 tactics. So that is one thing to look at. Is your plan just too complex? And, maybe you've built a complex plan to look impressive to the political partners, the government agencies you're working with. And then in that case, if that's what you have to do to survive, but you also have to communicate internally, like the complexity is not where you think it is. So then the next thing that really can kill your strategic plan is lack of communication. So you set your plan, you've hopefully done a little market research to see what your constituents, what your target audience, whether it's your donors, whether it's your members, whether it's your government agency, what do they find of value? How are they responding to what you're placing out there? And it's a lot of work, but it's not the worst idea in the world for large changes, for strategic plan to involve external constituents, because they're going to be the ones who tell you, I'm sick of your conference being in random remote areas that I can't get to, or I'm sick of hearing from you 15 times a week. Whatever your challenges are, that might not be something that you have recognized internally. So communicating with your constituents, communicating with your staff, communicating with the people who are implementing the plan, and then developing a regular communications cadence once a week, once a month, once a quarter. Here's where we are on our strategic plan. Everybody's involved in it. This is a team effort. We're bringing you all in. We want you all to know where we're at, and then let people know, like, okay, we've sent 3 additional messages to our membership. That doesn't seem to be working. So now we're also going to add this other tactic, and kind of keeping people on track and not on track as to, are you meeting the goals necessarily, but are you doing the tactics that you've promised to do? And that's very, very important, that if you don't follow up and ensure that people are doing the tactics, that is a surefire way of failing at your strategic plan. Finally, you need to build a fear-free environment, because when you try new things sometimes fail. That is the history of innovation, that, the Wright brothers, the Model T Ford, most drug trials, anything that has been an innovation of another thing has failed before it succeeded. And if you start blaming your staff for not making the results that you expect in terms of the metrics, but they've been doing the work, you cannot ask them to be wholeheartedly participating and executing your strategic plan if they're terrified that you're going to blame them for not meeting the metrics. You're trying, as an organization, a strategic plan by its nature is something that you're trying. It's something new, and you need to figure out together what is acceptable. Like, here are the tactics. You must do the tactics XYZ. But if the tactics don't lead to the results we expected, that's a team-wide conversation. It's not going to be a blame. And so you need to kind of figure out the happy medium between, are the tactics being executed? If they are they working? If they're not working, all right, let's go back to the drawing board and go to the next tactic, or refine the tactic, or go back to the constituents. Is this offering? We think this is valuable to you. Is it, or is it not? So those are basically the metrics for why your strategic plan fails, why 90% of strategic plans don't get off the ground. Number one, most importantly, you don't understand the value for your stakeholders. It is not enough any longer to say people have always done it, or people do it to make themselves feel good. It is not enough any longer. Number two is you have a very, very complicated plan. The plan is so complicated, it just, like, people get exhausted looking at it, and they have no desire to try to help execute it. Number three, you haven't differentiated between the planners and the executors and figured out who's doing what and who is doing the work and getting them on board. So number four is lack of communication. You have to be communicating the plan on an ongoing basis with your constituents, if you have an advisory board, and let them know where that's at, so that if there is a team that's all on top of the tactics and another team is not, they see that the plan is moving forward. It's not going to sit in a drawer and go away like they hope. So keeping that communication line open. And then finally, number five is just building that fear-free environment, that, people are afraid and they make a mistake and they're afraid to communicate that mistake. It's going to crumble your whole strategic plan, and you're not going to know why, because they're hiding in the back thinking, oh, I did this wrong, or I didn't, whatever the like, it didn't work. And that is, I tried this tactic, it didn't work. And they should not be afraid to tell you it didn't work. So that's it for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, please be sure to like it or subscribe to this channel for more tips on nonprofit strategic planning. And go to my website, sign up for my newsletter, Let's Make Some Noise, and you'll get reminders and resources of strategic planning tips. Look forward to seeing you next time.